Aloha and welcome to Island Connections. I'm Ibrahim Aoude, COFA and Micronesians in Hawaii, the topic for today. And we have guests who would help us discuss this very important matter for Hawaii and for the United States and for Micronesia, of course. And Ulla Hasager, she's Director of Civic Engagement at the College of Social Sciences, University of Hawaii, Mānoa. And Deja Ostrowski, she is from COFACAN, which is like a Compact of Free Association, Community Advocacy Network. And also we have Joakim Peter, he's PhD candidate in education and at UHM and director on leave from Chuuck campus, College of Micronesia. Welcome all. And I would like to ask you, first of all, Joakim, maybe first, what is the significance of this? And also give us some kind of geographic location for Micronesia and for the COFA states.
Well, thank you very much for having us on your program again. Last time we were here, we touched a little bit on this, and I think we discussed the issue of the healthcare restoration for the COFA citizens from Micronesia, and with some recent development with the court cases, and that's why this issue again has come back to light in the public's eye, and of course certainly with the individuals who are affected by this, namely the Micronesians who are living in Hawaii. But I think it's always important to try to situate the discussion within the larger context, because the relationship between the United States and these these freely associated nations in Micronesia, as they are called currently under this discussion, has spanned many, many years. And if you were to go back...
In fact, we can go to maps so that you can talk more about it.
Yeah. If you can show the map, this is the Pacific region. And we all know there are three regions in the Pacific, the Polynesia to the east, the Polynesian Triangle, and then a little bit above Australia is Melanesia, and then that whole region above Melanesia, it's called Micronesia. And basically Micronesia geographically, it includes the Northern Mariana Islands, including Guam, to the north, and to the west, Palau. And if you go just a little bit to the west, you have the Philippines. But I want to show this because culturally, this is a very big region, all the way from Kiribati, or the Republic of Kiribati, to the Marshall Islands, and then Federated States of Micronesia in the middle, Palau, or Republic of Palau. And then to the north, you have the U.S. interest area also, the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, and that's the Commonwealth of the United States. And of course, Guam has always been a territory since 1880s. And this whole region here, if you look at it, this is roughly the size of United States continental, the nation of the United States. And this whole region here has been, dominated by U.S. interests, and basically in relationship with the United States under this current arrangement called the Compact of Free Association. And if we have the next slide, these is the region, these are the nations that are under this special arrangement with the United States called the Compact of Free Association. And that basically is a set of treaties between the United States and these nations, Federated States of Micronesia, Republic of the Marshall Islands, and Republic of Palau. And part of the agreement basically for the United States is that it sustained U.S. military interests and control over these island regions, and of course around that whole area, and in sort of like it exists in perpetuity and for a very long time. And in one of the agreements in return for this, and I think it was actually the United States, according to some conversation, that insisted that there must be open access between these islands and the United States, because these islands were former territories of the U.S. after World War II under the United Nations trusteeship program. And part of its responsibility was to ensure that the goal of trusteeship was basically that this island should have self-governance, and self-determination was a big factor in that. And that sort of ran counter to U.S. interests in that area, which is basically that they needed to have military control and exclusive rights to that island. So what basically the COFA nations have given up in this agreement is exclusive rights for the U.S. Over its land, its water, and its airspace. And in exchange for other provisions in the compact, including the open immigration compact. So what basically the open immigration compact allows the citizens of the COFA nations to come into the U.S. to establish residency. And part of the compact, the language of the compact was very clear that these islands should come in and establish themselves as residents and gain education, economic welfare, and also other services that everybody else was entitled to. Okay. And of course, part of it is, of course, they work and they pay taxes.
Great, yeah. For now, good, then we can continue with that. But Deja, would you like to add to that from your experience and practice?
Well, I think one of the difficulties here is that there is the Compact of Free Association, which started out as a sort of treaty between the United States federal government and then these territories as trust territories and then as sovereign nations. And so there is that sort of legal distinction. And then at the same time, there is the idea of COFA coming to of residents from the 3 states that are under the compact treaties coming to the United States as immigrants or non-citizens. So there's sort of that legal idea of what sort of rights do they have as immigrants to the United States as non-citizens. So there's the COFA treaties, which is a federal thing. Then there is the rights of the immigrants. And then there's also sort of how does the states treat Micronesians, because under the Compact of Free Association, there has been an acknowledgement that there is what they call an impact, and that's just a one-sided understanding of what the negative impact would be financially on a state like Hawai'i, and then also the territories of Guam, who receive a lot of immigrants coming from the United States. So there's sort of those 3 different legal things that there are to deal with regarding the Compact of Free Association that's a little bit different than immigrants or migrants coming in from other nations.
Great. And Ulla, I know you teach courses in ethnic studies, Hawaii and the Pacific, and this Micronesia is one of the case studies. So could you tell us something a little bit more about the notion of COFA and how it impacts Micronesia and also Micronesians in Hawaii, so we can start talking about the real issues in terms of what Micronesians face right now.
The Compact of Free Association creates different conditions for people from those 3 countries of Micronesia that have this type of agreement with the United States. And in the Ethnic Studies 320 class, we are teaching to what we call capacious issues, big issues, contested issues. And certainly the whole inter-ethnic picture in Hawaii is very dominated by discrimination and stereotyping against Micronesians right now. And when we add to that the differences in the laws and the recent court case ruling regarding the basic health Hawaii, it makes it very kind of different to be from those countries, and people need to understand that. So that's part of what we're teaching in a number of ways. Later I'll talk more about how we give students an experiential understanding of this. But I know Jojo has been working with specifically with how COFA migrants are impacted by this. So I'll leave that to him.
Yeah, sure. But what I want to show on the screen is what COFA citizens are eligible for in terms of social services, and then we can go to what extent these have been met, So we'll show that if you would like Joakim to talk about it.
Well, I think it speaks to what Deja points out earlier, and maybe she can talk a little bit about that, because one of the thinking behind open access is basically we understood that there's a lot of need back in the region because of the fact that a lot of the infrastructures were slow to develop this kind of reliance that any infrastructure would be to make the the regions be able to handle, or allow the regions to be able to handle all of its needs in terms of the social services. So we understood at that point that there has to be some kind of a balancing act to mitigate the issues that need back home, in terms of the healthcare, the education, and then the fact that the individuals are able to take on this by themselves, to be able to take to move to look for better education and better healthcare. And I think one of the issues is the disparities between what they're able to pay into the system in terms of contribution and what they're able to take out of the system. And I think Deja can speak a little bit to the range of programs that the COFA citizens are
sure.
eligible for.
You pick up from there, Deja.
Yeah, first I just wanted to frame the idea that in the United States, when we're talking about eligibility for social service programs, there's sort of two different kinds of social service programs. The first kind is what we call means tested, which means that your eligibility, so your ability to access those programs, depends on your means or your income. And then the other type of programs we're talking about are just general programs that usually we offer to everyone in the United States. And since, I think we'll talk about it later in 1996, but in the United States, your eligibility for those programs, if you're not a United States citizen, it depends on what your immigrant status is. And the difficulty is that the way immigration law has developed, and then also our laws regarding social services programs, what you are called carries with it what we call in law a term of art. And so calling someone a refugee, in normal colloquial language, we have an idea of what that means, sort of fleeing a country. But under law and immigration law, calling someone a refugee gives you a certain status and availability for accessing those means-tested programs, which are programs that we offer to a lot of people. So calling someone undocumented, that doesn't allow them access sometimes to programs. But if we call someone a migrant, that's sort of an area of law that hasn't been explored. And for COFA citizens, that is something that's sort of been developed piecemeal. So for the eligibility for social service programs, if you look, we have Social Security supplemental income. That's something that in the United States in general, if you are a non-citizen, if you have an immigrant status where you're a lawful permanent resident, then you can access that program after you pass a sort of 5-year test. But for COFA migrants, they can never access that program. That program is not available for you if you are a COFA migrant. The same thing with Medicaid, which is sort of the general thing we're talking about, which they say COFA migrants are generally ineligible for that. That's a means-tested benefit where for Medicaid, if you do not have enough of a means to pay for your own healthcare services, you can access or be able to get low, insurance, health insurance. And so for COFA migrants, because they are considered non-immigrants, which is normally a term referred to for tourists, they don't have access to those benefits.
So you mean like Micronesians are are tourists in Hawaii?
Yeah, under their, so the Compact of Free Association, the Compact of Free Association, it calls COFA migrants non-immigrants able to establish residency. Now, that's one of those things where I think when people are reading that, that sounds okay, so they're, they don't understand that with law, calling someone a non-immigrant brings with it a whole lot of different issues, right? So non-immigrants sometimes are people who retain the citizenship of their home country, but it also comes with it an idea of not permanent, a not permanent residency. And so, they're classified similar as tourists or people who come here under the United States under the visa waiver program.
Yeah. But so what's, let me follow up on that. What's the use of having the COFA, the agreement, right, COFA agreement, if there is this? did the U.S. federal government, of course, like cheat or trick those guys in Micronesia? I mean, what is, I mean, how do you look at it? I mean, was it like a straightforward, honest kind of agreement?
Well, I don't know. I cannot say for sure what that meant, but I do know this, that after 1996, when the law was changed and there was a big immigration reform, our last immigration reform, and the idea was they wanted, prior to 1996, a lot of people who are undocumented were able to access health services. So the idea was, we don't want to give all these means-tested benefits to just anyone. We want to give it to certain immigrants in the United States. So we want people to have legal status or be able to prove they're here for a while. And then later on, we started giving it to refugees, people from Cuba, people from different areas that we felt there was a special relationship. For example, it's called Amerasians. The idea is for children of servicemen who were in Vietnam, and also people who are Hmong, hill tribe dwellers who helped the U.S. out militarily. But for COFA migrants, when there was that sort of negotiation in the Immigration Reform Act, they were actually taken out in later drafts. So what I can say then is I think there was a deliberate attempt to remove COFA migrants and the people from what was then the trust territories from access to these services.
Okay, great. Yeah, go ahead.
My point earlier is this. During the negotiation of the Compact of Free Association, the whole idea is that there are two independent parties and they make an agreement in the treaties. And so far what we have been given up, or what we've given to the U.S. in these agreements, has never changed. I mean, the U.S. still has all of those that control over, and you know, that share of it is still there. It's on the table. We put it on the table, eyes wide open. We know what we committed to. On the other hand, you know, these things changes. So one way you look at it is that the rules of the game has changed without, you know, the consensus of the other party. And if that is a treaty, and I think the fact that, you know, this went on, and whoever is in charge of keeping track of these changes and how they relate to the spirit of the treaty and the compact, you know, that is a responsibility that has to be upheld. You know,
yeah.
You cannot change the game in the middle of the water without, you know, both parties agreeing to this change. It is a treaty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good, because I wanted to ask Ulla, because she teaches about this in terms of Hawaii and the Pacific course. Well, what could you say more, or what more can be said about Micronesians? I mean, the historic relationship from like the 40s between them and the United States, and what are some of the real problems, especially the Marshallese, that they have? And what do you think of this COFA treaty? I mean, if somebody is, you know, in agreement with another party, and then they don't live up to the terms of the agreement. At least that's what it seems to me.
Well, after the Second World War, when the world was hoping for eternal peace, I guess, there were attempts to rid the world of colonies, and the UN had provisions to encourage colonizers to get rid of their colonies and help the countries to become self-governing and all this. And an area of the Pacific was set aside and became a trust territory under the United Nations, but administered by the United States. And as such, it became kind of the backyard of strategic considerations for the United States. And the COFA countries today are at the center of that particular area. Eventually it broke up in independent nations, but the Marshall Islands became an area for nuclear testing shortly after the ending of the Second World War. Tinian in CNMI became the place where the aircraft that carried the atomic bombs to Japan was launched. The Federal States of Micronesia became an area of what we call benign neglect, just controlling people going in and out of that area and who could work in the area but not really using it for anything. So also a strategic consideration, I'm convinced, by the United States. Nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands affected the whole region. There were a class action lawsuit, for instance, in Guam, showing that people actually were affected health-wise by the nuclear testing. The diseases acquired through a lifetime. In anthropology, we usually teach that they are not given on to the next generation. But when we are talking about diseases related to nuclear experiments, they will be carried on because of the very long time to break down nuclear residue. So what we see today with several of the immigrants coming to Hawaii or Guam or other places in the United States, they come for health reasons. We have had classes where students have been interviewing immigrants, I should say COFA citizens, about their health issues, and there's strong indication that that's related to the nuclear testing. So however we look at it, government-wise, development of infrastructure, whatever it might be, from my perspective, people coming from the so-called COFA countries need to be, have a right to be here.
Yeah, so I wanted to establish this kind of history. It was very critical, especially the nuclear testing, etc., because of the health problems and the responsibility that the U.S. has for that towards the Micronesians, especially the Marshallese, but that they are not really meeting those kinds of obligations. So that's why I wanted to talk perhaps about the health problems and the question of basic health Hawaii, which I know Joakim and Deja also have been involved in. So would you care to comment on these things?
Well, Deja and I belong to an ad hoc organization that we created called COFACAN, COFA Community Advocacy Network. It's not the only advocacy group that's out there. As a matter of fact, Micronesia Health Advisory Coalition and Micronesian United, Micronesian Community Network, and a lot of other organizations have been at this for a long time, since 2009. And the basic premise for this is this: there has to be fairness.
Yeah, we can show something on the
the fairness for
screen.
What the COFA citizens are like. For example, we came out with a one-pager, and basically, along with our partners at LEJ, what is now Appleseed Center for Justice and Economic Justice and stuff. So we come out with this one-pager to sort of like educate the public, because the predominant discourse out there is that Micronesians are this burden on the system. And I think a lot of this racism that we see leveled at Micronesian citizens and children in the school, and it's really damaging. But a lot of that, we need to trace the source of where that comes from, with this misunderstanding of the, of the whole picture. And like our one-pager that we created basically points out the fact that Micronesian citizens work here at a good rate, and they're paying into the tax base that's paying for all the social services, just like any other group, but they're not getting, a fair share of that social services too. So what happened in 2009, and I'll set up this, and I'll ask Deja to help me out with this. In 2009, during that economic problem, the state of Hawaii decided to enact a different, or within its own state Medicaid program, the MedQuest, to set up a coverage just for the COFA citizens called Basic Health Hawaii. And BHH became the talk of town at that time, because people were, the way that the state went about it, and it's in announcing it that within a month before they enact it. And the timeline where basically, and the fact that it was a reduced coverage, and as you can see, this is the proposed PHH coverage that was supposed to go in, or that went into effect in 2009. And I think if Deja can talk to some of the organization organizing that they were doing at that time.
Yeah, good. I just want to interject something like in terms of, you know, how people think about Micronesians here in Hawaii. Even among my students this semester, they had like the wrong idea because out of ignorance, because they did not know. But what helped them is when we had this specific connections forum, and then when you came to my class and talked to them, they completely changed their minds, those people who had those kinds of problems. So I just wanted to say that, in fact, maybe a program like this might help, you know, in terms of correcting the misinformation or the misconceptions about it. So I just want to say that before Deja starts.
Well, moving in then, I'll say, you know, the state of Hawaii provided Medicaid benefits to COFA migrants, the same as with all other immigrants, and then also U.S. citizens for several years, since 1996. And that was sort of a choice that the federal government gave the states. They said, you can implement what we have, but we're not going to give you reimbursement money for people you cover who are not mandatory covered people that you have to cover. Sorry.
Yeah.
So what happened? So what happened is when the states started getting into the budget crunch, there was like what we say is sort of an institutionalized discriminatory thought, which was, you know who's causing us all these problems? It's paying for all this health care for these Micronesians. And so what the state did, what Jojo alluded to, they said, okay, we're just going to cut the benefits for Micronesians and we're going to put them on this program, BHH. And then what was most important is they said, we're going to put a cap on it. So we're only going to give this to 7,000 people. So if you're brand new and you're coming into the state of Hawaii, you don't get anything. And so what they did is basically said, okay, we'll just continue providing benefits for everyone we have because we don't want to cut them off chemotherapy or dialysis. We don't want to feel bad about that, but we don't want to give it to anyone else. And so they created that program. They sent out a notice within just a couple months. And so what they did actually in creating a whole new program, they amended and created rules about a benefits program, which is actually illegal under the law. So that's what the first lawsuit was about. It said, DHS, we're not even going to talk about the program and if it's even adequate or legal or discriminatory. We're just going to do a lawsuit that says you didn't even go through rulemaking. So there in July 2009, they announced the program. And then in August, there was a lawsuit that's filed for a TRO and preliminary injunction that said, before you even implement this program, you need to go through what's called Chapter 91 rulemaking procedure. And that's Chapter 91, meaning you need to follow the law. And then also a due process claim, which said you did not follow due process in cutting people off from a benefit program and reducing their benefits without giving them adequate notice. In particular, the letters were not, they were all in English, when under our state language access law and also civil rights law at a national level, there are certain thresholds you need to meet and actually provide an interpretation and translation of documents. So there was also a claim for that. And the case, there was a temporary injunction, preliminary injunction, that was won in September 2009. And it said, before you do this program, you need to do rulemaking. So the state in December 2009 announced they would have public hearings and actually held those public hearings in January 2010. And from what we hear, those were the largest attended public hearings for any rulemaking change of the state's Department of Human Services. Since then, there were lots of public hearings about it. And again, the state still came out with the program BHH. So if you'll see the next slide, in May 2010, they announced and said, even though we did all these public hearings, we're going to do BHH. And I think what's really important is that DHS said this program is necessary to save money. And I think moving farther on into the future, where we are right now, I think we need to ask ourselves, is cutting off a group of people from healthcare services and preventative services actually going to save us money?
Yeah, we can go to this slide actually just to...
to show this. So if we're going to provide people only 12 outpatient visits, you can imagine if you have cancer, just getting diagnosed, that can take 12 outpatient visits. So that's sort of the idea that people try and still try to say is this program actually going to do what the state says? Is it going to save money? And the state said, we can create this program and save money. So to move into the second lawsuit.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the second lawsuit was actually about the program and whether or not the program was discriminatory. So law says under the Constitution, the 14th Amendment, that states can have what is called a facially discriminatory program. So that's a program that names something like alienage, national origin, or race. You can name that, but you have to meet a certain level of test. And there will be a certain level of what they call scrutiny or some sort of oversight by the court to determine whether or not that is discriminatory. So the case actually said, number one, we feel this is discriminatory because you are using to cut people off in your decision, you are basing that decision based on someone's national origin from the COFA nations, and then also based on their immigration status, or what's called alienage in law. So that case went up before Judge Seabright. And if you see the timeline...
Yeah, we can show it on
in
screen.
August 2010. And then in November, Judge Seabright denied the state's motion to dismiss. And this was actually the most important ruling of the case. And what that said was, when the Judge Seabright reviewed the state's actions, it said that in creating a policy that specifically names race, the state has to meet the highest bar, which is called strict scrutiny. And it said that under this strict scrutiny, the state has not proven that they have an adequate basis to discriminate against a class of immigrants, or a class of people based on their national origin, so COFA migrants. And that motion to dismiss was actually a very good ruling. It said that this is the standard that the state has to meet. And then after that, in December 15th, the judge issued an injunction. An injunction is sort of like a temporary means under law, and there's 4 things you have to meet. You have to show there's going to be huge harm, that the plaintiffs are most likely to prevail on their case, and then there's some other tests to see whether this is a important thing, whatever. So the case won, and that effectively stopped BHH. So it said temporarily we will block BHH because the plaintiffs are likely to prevail on this case, and they are likely to, and there's going to be a very damaging harm that happens here. So what happened is, after that ruling came down, Governor Abercrombie met with some COFA citizens. And do you want to talk about that meeting?
Yeah, in the meeting, basically, it was a group of advocates from Micronesia and their supporters, and they met with the governor, the current governor, and basically said, please don't appeal the case, just leave it as it is. This administration has nothing, it's not the one that started the case. You don't need to do it. However, he said that he will not actually put it into effect, even if the case was. But he felt that he needed to move ahead with the case, so he did. I think in September, about a year and a half ago.
The state actually appealed the injunction. And so what's important about that is what the state said is, we want to appeal the temporary measure blocking the program because we want to have the right to discriminate. And then also what they really disagreed with was Judge Seabright's understanding that in order to cut someone off based on alienage, that the state needed to meet that highest standard of strict scrutiny. And they wanted to say is that we actually have the right to discriminate against people of different alienage just by providing only a small rational basis. That's what the state said. So they had the injunction, and the litigation went on for a while. There was hearings, and this was an appeal to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And the Ninth Circuit governs the entire western half of the United States. And so what was really important to understand for this case is that that ruling about what the standard is on whether or not a state can constitutionally discriminate against a class of people based on their alienage, that is going to set, or that has set now, precedent for the entire western half of the United States. So it's a very important case. We know, do you want me to go on with it?
I think that we need to talk about the latest and then what we
right, do. Yeah, but before that, I want, because I know, Ulla, you work with Micronesians in terms of homelessness, etc. Could you say some of the impacts of these kinds of practices, I mean, state practices that, and how might it impact the Micronesians as you see it from your own civic engagement, service learning kind of activities with the students?
Well, the Basic Health Hawaii, in the short time it was in effect, already had major implications for the COFA citizens in Hawaii. I think people passed away for lack of medical care. There is a modesty that I often find working with COFA migrants, a tendency to not push hard for rights, and I see that as a cultural thing. That makes it really hard when you are attacked from the outside to protect yourself. I was part of that meeting with the governor that Jojo talked about earlier, and the people present were very respectful towards the governor and the other authorities present. He did promise that Micronesians were not going to be treated any different from other groups in Hawaii. And to me, that's honorable. However, he's not going to be the governor forever, and the fact that he considered it necessary to appeal the case to not have groups set precedents were hurtful for the migrants, but there were not any strong opposition. It was taken in. This is how it is. We will do other things. And other things were done. COFACAN were successful in getting resolutions to both the state.
That's like in 2013 now we're talking more about. That's what you want to talk about, Jojo.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that on that April 1st, on April Fool's Day, that the Ninth Circuit Court, in a ruling, the 2-to-1 ruling, basically agreed with the state. But we wanted to make sure that people understand that, first of all, that we need to move forward with this and recognize the issue for what it is. And it is an unfair issue, and we need to work together as a community. We're basically trying to get the court to rehear the case, and I think it was filed on the 15th of this month, last week, by the Appleseed Center for Justice. Has filed for a rehearing of the case, and we're very happy about that. But if you move forward a little bit on the PowerPoint, we also wanted to point out that, I'll just go through the next few PowerPoints that there has been a lot of support from our community, and we're continuing reminding the public that this needs to be handled, taken care of. We cannot see it, the fact that we don't want to see this stay as it is. We need to remove the rule off the books, and so we've come up with the sort of a plan of action that we need people to support. If you can keep moving forward, please. Yeah. And basically, our goal moving forward is to, first of all, we've already requested for a complete hearing or a rehearing on the case, but also to continue maintain the level of support for our COFA citizens under the MCWES, and remind people that as far as the state has put out there that people should not panic and stop going to see the doctor. That's what happened last time, and a lot of problem happened. So please continue to go see your doctor, and if you have MCWES. And we continue that level of assistance continue with our COFA citizens, and also we need to get this rule repealed, because as long as it continues to sit on a book, it continues to create this problem of feeling of that there is this issue with PHH that it needs to go away. So I think there's a lot of things that we need to Deja can also talk to some of them.
But before we go into more like the federal kind of thing, I mean, in terms of what's happening in terms of the federal, but before that we can continue with that.
Well, I think one of the important things is to understand what the Ninth Circuit ruling actually said. And the Ninth Circuit ruling didn't say that BHH is an okay program. What the Ninth Circuit said is it said that Judge Seabright's decision that the highest level of scrutiny is what applies to this decision was wrong, and that actually what should apply is a lower basis, which is the rational basis test. So what it did is it actually kicked the case back down to the lower court and said, you need to make a decision about this program using a less of a standard of review. So that's what the case said. What's difficult is that when the media reports the case, sometimes they will say things like, oh, the state doesn't have to provide benefits for COFA migrants. And that's actually not what the ruling said. And the other thing is what Jojo alluded to, which is the sort of things that come after. A lot of people remember what happened when BHH was in effect. And people are not able to go to the doctor, didn't know if they're going to get dialysis, you know, visits were used up automatically, and then some things what happens is service providers know, well, if I accept this patient, I'm only going to be able to be reimbursed for a certain amount of services. So maybe I don't want to accept this patient because I don't want to be put in that situation where I am taking someone off chemotherapy because they have already used up their visits. And so what happens is a lot of people may see that ruling and kind of come to their own idea about what they can and cannot do under the law. So that's the problem when BHH is still on the books. It creates this sort of understanding about whether or not people can cut and what kind of decisions people can make based about someone's alienage or someone being a non-citizen, and what puts people in that position to discriminate and say, well, I'm going to use my rational basis and I'm just going to decide that because this one person is a Micronesian patient, who knows what type of reimbursement I'm going to get for providing care for them. So maybe I'm going to be the one that just makes that decision.
Yeah, it's interesting, like those media outlets. Did you have contact with them to try and correct certain things, or do they listen to you if you do, or if, did you, or?
We've tried our best to work with the media, and you know we've come up with talking points. We've created a very good resource website called ltpacific.org, where people can go to, whether you're the media or the public, they can go to and get some of good information from. But also at the same time, what we need to do is, like, I think that what we need to do is, instead of just continue to capitalize on the negative impact, all of these things, like, it makes you want, like, you as a people, like Micronesians, always, like, when you hear yourself being talked about in public or in hearing or in the paper, it's almost like you're an impact, you're a responsibility. You're federal, no, these people are federal responsibility, this state responsibility. It almost makes you feel like you don't have anything to contribute. But that's not true. I mean, and I think we need to start empowering that. We need to move beyond all of these negative things, because it just creates a climate of hate. And it's really counteractive and counterproductive to everything that this society is about. So we need to move beyond that. We need to highlight the positive, and we have some positive stories. And I think if we remember what the master navigator Mau told his students, and that's a good point to move forward. Something about, like, taking what they have done and move forward with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a bit of connection between Micronesians and Kanaka Maoli. I mean, we can show this on the screen. What he said.
And this is a very powerful quote, and it empowers people. It empowers not just people, but the connections between people to move forward as recognizing each other as one. Big family and ohana, and start to look for the good in each other, instead of trying to,
Right, and in the symposium, his son was at the symposium, and he talked also about that. Did you want to say something?
I was not. I actually missed the symposium, but I've heard about it so much. I was on the continental United States, so I wasn't able to attend.
And there's a picture that I've seen, like on the internet, and a picture of Mao and Nainoa and Thompson, and this is such a very powerful picture, because. This is when Nainoa went back to see Mao for the last time, and they brought the canoe on Sarawak. And it reminds me a lot about that quote that, and I think we as a community, we need to move forward.
Sure.
And starting to, and education is a good place to start.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think
Ulla
and his students at Palolo, with the students from Palolo, who lives in Palolo, they have great program. And if you look at what they're doing and try to do more of that. And I think the students, of course, in Kali also, with KKV, but there's a lot of things going on there that needs to be written about in the media, needs to be focused on, instead of just looking at all of these negative things. Numbers are numbers, and they're relative to a certain set of truths.
Right.
And you can spin them any which way you want.
Absolutely,
but
yeah.
And also the the Micronesians are they're doing good things out there. There's basketball game going on with the empowerment of the young people and things like that. There's a many opportunity for people to get in.
Yeah, I just gonna, before I go to Ulla, I just gonna say, were you folks invited to the media, like to be interviewed or talk positive stories or something?
Well,
could you say that?
Like sometimes in the media, when they need somebody to say certain things, of course they ask you to be interviewed. But I think there's a lot of there's a lot of cover. There's some coverage also, like that story that came out in.
We can show some on the screen now from
tournament.
that. We can show these are some of the things you were talking about, Joe.
Right.
Yeah, there was a new article in Hanaho magazine about the basketball tournament. But some of the problem is understanding that the basketball tournament has now turned into an annual thing. So even though there was an article about one, it keeps going on. It wasn't just a one-time thing. And there's also a women's volleyball tournament. There's Marshallese Education Day. There's a lot of other things.
Right. Yeah. So that's good. So I want to go to Ulla. First of all, if you want to talk about, like, for instance, the canoe and all that, we can show that actually, the photo. And if you can say something about that, but also what I'm mostly interested in, from your perspective as someone who teaches about Hawaii and the Pacific, in terms of the federal obligations, and we talked before about COFA and all that kind of stuff, but what do you think can be done to correct that thing? I mean, that really terrible problem. And then when you're done, I would like to see also Deja and Jojo's reflections on that as well.
Well, I think first and foremost we need to educate students and the general public about the true story of Micronesia and the conditions of COFA citizens in Hawaii. There's a lot of stereotypes, misconceptions out there, as you mentioned earlier. So, and we need to incorporate it in the classes that we're teaching. I know the class you were talking about is about racial and ethnic relations in Hawaii. My class that I'm teaching right now is particularly about Pacific relations, but almost any class there is occasions to bring this up, and I think we need to do that. One of the best practices for teaching in general is community engagement. And with Jojo's help and others, particularly Bonnie Kahapea, the captain of Kanehunamoku, for instance, we have
That's
created...
the one, right? We can show it on the screen again.
Yeah, this is Kanehunamoku. We have created a program we call Kaholova'a, which is not only teaching voyaging skills and sharing knowledge between our host culture, the Native Hawaiian culture, and Micronesian cultures. It's also giving youth of both college and younger age groups a chance to spend time together, to get to know each other. And as we all know, there's nothing like working together and getting to know each other as people to get rid of stereotypes. But working in the field, learning about each other's skills and cultures, create...
These are some of the students and people?
Yeah, this is a summer program for middle school students that is focused on teaching the STEM disciplines, science, technology, engineering, and math through using traditional practices from the Pacific and also from a social science perspective. Creating those kinds of problems and opportunities for students to not only develop their skills but also their ethnic relations are, I think, key to creating a better society here. It's a beginning. There's a long way to go, but...
Is that from the FBI? No.
We have a lot of programs like these and very good results from them. These are middle school students at Coconut Island.
Yeah. What is that?
That is something I'll leave to Jojo and Deja.
I'd like Deja to talk a little bit about this. This is one of we have a Facebook page, COFACAN, and we're trying to generate interest in the public and trying to get people. And this is the latest post that came up. And what did this come from?
Well, we know that there is, and this is where it shows there's a lot of people working on a lot of different things. This isn't COFACAN's mural, right? So what we're saying, there's a lot of people who are sort of seeing these connections and making them. And this is something that 808 Urban, the graffiti crew, I guess, is doing that's relating to Master Navigator, Mau Pilug, Papa Mau, for the Hokulea worldwide voyage. And so what we're asking is also sort of this understanding for people who are doing things with COFACAN is to sort of highlight that here is someone who has is Micronesian from the island of Yap, right, and has given so much to all of us. And so we're asking people to sort of share this and trying to get a social media campaign going. So this is something just to show how here in Honolulu we have a lot of positive contributions by Micronesian members who are giving those positive and still currently doing that. So it's not just only about Papa Mau, but even his legacy and what is lived on.
Right, like his son and the legacy. And I know that Kanaka Maoli really respect that and treasure and cherish these kinds of relationships with Micronesians. And there's going to be more of that. But we want to make it also beyond the particular ethnic groups or particular like the host culture, Kanaka Maoli culture, to have it like as a state policy and state law to deal with that. But also, I mean, I'd like to get more of your reactions to the question of what can be done with the federal situation. Deja, maybe first, and then Jojo.
Well, at a federal idea, a federal solution can be like what I told you. There's sort of the three different rules we're dealing with. But at a federal level, the United States has, in many instances, recognized sort of military contributions of other groups, as well as sort of understood maybe someone is another group that we, as a policy, as a nation, need to provide special access to. So that's things like Cuba, for example, or like I mentioned, Hmong, or the Amerasians in Vietnam. And so it is entirely up to the federal government to add COFA migrants to eligibility of programs and to understand that special relationship and the continuing benefits that the United States gets, particularly with the military doing a Pacific pivot. So it is up to the federal government, and at any time if Congress wants to act, they can add COFA migrants as someone who's eligible for all of these programs.
Jojo?
And I think there has to be a case to be made for, you know, a greater understanding between peoples, like people from the Federated States of Micronesia, I mean the COFA nations and the United States, or just here in Hawaii. And I think Hawaii has a very unique place in all of this. And the fact that it's the closest point of the United States as a state within the Pacific, but also as a, you know, culturally, you know, it's almost like you have a special place in, as a gateway of understanding between its specific connections and its roots within, you know, the nation as a, you know, as part of the United States. So I think there's a lot of room for understanding, and Hawaii has a good role to play out there.
Yeah. the way I look at it in terms of the relationship of the COFA states with the United States, on the one hand, there's like quote unquote free association. I don't understand what that means really, you know. Although I have been dealing with this, I taught also Hawaii and the Pacific. I'm going to teach it next semester, etc. Still don't know what that really means. I mean, in practice, that's one. So there is a free association, but is that really like independence? You know, that's one. And whether the status of the COFA states, I mean, in real practice, whether they are part of the United States or not part of the United States. I'd like to see some, you know, of your reactions to that, hear some of those.
Well, in reality, they are independent nations under a treaty with the United States. That is the Compact of Free Association is the treaty.
That's the legal
That's
thing.
the legal termination of the treaty, how you define it.
Yeah. But in practice, is that what's happening?
It's always different.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I mean, that is, to me, it is an important thing, because that would really govern what we are talking about, whether it's basic health Hawaii or the relationship of Hawaii as a state to the federal government in relationship to the Micronesians, you know, in Hawaii, but also, as you said, in the continental United States as well, wherever there are Micronesians.
Yeah, I mean, ironically, some states in the continental United States provide for COFA migrants not just access to medical care, but access to like food stamps and a lot of other benefits, even though those states don't receive the compact impact funds. So there's been recent things done, and only about 30% of COFA migrants actually live in Hawaii. The rest live outside of the state of Hawaii. So that's something to consider as well. You know.
Yeah. So, like, how much does the state of Hawaii get in terms of COFA impact funds?
Do you know how many millions?
It's about
of
$11 million.
Yeah.
annually.
11 million every year.
Right. As part of the
and
impact
how
fund.
many, you know, Micronesians do we have here?
17.
17,000.
The current count between 15 and 17.
Yeah, but
There's no accurate way of counting it.
right.
And
And that's
it's never
30%
been.
of the entire Micronesians who live in the U.S.
Right.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So anyway, we're basically out of time. Any quick comments, like a few seconds comments?
It's a long relationship that established with the very premises on U.S. interests.
Okay.
And Micronesian interest has to be protected as well.
Okay. We are flat out of time. I'm sorry, but thank you all for coming over. And we'll see you next semester. Mahalo no iloha. Aloha.